From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Doris Polo. We begin in Ecuador, where a mass mobilization of indigenous people has arrived in Quito to protest against recently imposed austerity measures. Thousands of people from various indigenous communities across the Sierra region have been marching to Quito since last Friday. They were greeted by citizens on both the north and the south of Quito as they entered the city late on Monday. Mass protests started last week across Ecuador after President Lenin Moreno announced a number of IMF-backed austerity measures, including the end of state subsidies for regular fuel and diesel. The Ecuadorian President Lenin Moreno gave a televised address late on Monday, stating that he has transferred the seat of government to the city of Guayaquil after having abandoned the capital, Quito. He went on to assert that reported incidents of violence indicate the protests are organized in order to bring down his administration.
Countrymen, I've moved to the city of Guayaquil, and I've also transferred the seat of government to the city in accordance with the Constitution. I've always put the peace and tranquility of Ecuadorians before my own well-being. What's happened over these days in Ecuador isn't a protest of discontent because of a government decision. The violence, vandalism, and looting shows that here there is an organized political effort to destabilize the government and an end to constitutional and democratic order.
President Moreno also blamed his predecessor Rafael Correa, a number of other former Ecuadorian ministers, and bizarrely, the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, for the anti-austerity protests across Ecuador.
Do you really believe that it's a coincidence that Correa, Virgilio Hernandez, Patiño, and Pavón traveled just weeks ago to Venezuela together? Together with Maduro, they activated their plan to destabilize us.
Indigenous protesters have also arrived in the city of Guayaquil, where President Lenin Moreno has holed himself up. In response to this, the roads leading to the city's wealthiest neighborhood have been blocked by authorities. The financial hub of Ecuador, Guayaquil, has also been rocked by anti-government protests in recent days. On Monday, protests intensified in many cities across Ecuador as protesters were faced with heavy police repression. Since the protest started, social media has been flooded with videos of police brutality, with protesters and journalists often being beaten down by security forces. Most of the country also remains paralyzed as roads have been blocked for days and classes have been cancelled since last Thursday. The president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, has denounced violent threats coming from Colombia. President Maduro said that the Bolivarian Republic wants peace, sovereignty, calm, life and development, meaning an orange alert had to remain in effect along Venezuela's border with Colombia.
I've decided that the orange alert will stay in effect. Phase 2. No armed group can be in Venezuelan territory. That's why we have the powerful Bolivarian National Armed Forces.
President Maduro also denounced new internal and external threats of violence pushed for by the Colombian Senator Álvaro Uribe Vélez, together with President Iván Duque.
I'm speaking to the Colombian people, to Colombian public opinion. Be careful with Iván Duque and Álvaro Uribe, because they're planning other forms of violence against Venezuela, and they want and have contributed to an internal war. They haven't resolved the internal war, and now they want to cause a war against Venezuela. We're not going to allow that. We haven't allowed it, and we won't allow it. We want peace, sovereignty, and equality.
We're not going to allow that.
We move now to Peru, where people have taken to the streets of the capital to oppose President Martín Vizcarra's recent dissolution of Congress. Protesters called Vizcarra's decision to dissolve Congress and call new elections a coup, while opposition lawmakers have accused the president of overstepping the bounds of the Constitution. Meanwhile, Vizcarra said his decision was within his constitutional powers and blamed lawmakers for repeatedly trying to block his anti-corruption reforms.
What I don't agree with is that President Vizcarra has completely become a dictator. In other words, if they don't do what he wants, he closes it. He closes Congress. The Constitutional Court doesn't listen, I'll close it. The judicial authorities don't listen, I'll close it. Where are we living? We average citizens don't understand the laws, but we do demand a true democracy.
Taxi drivers in Mexico City have blocked major avenues across the capital to protest ride-sharing applications like Uber and Cabify. Many tourists were stranded at the airport as taxis blocked access to Terminal 1 of the international airport. This even though Mexico City was among the first cities in the world to regulate Uber after the ride-sharing app gained worldwide popularity. Shifting gears now, Brazil's public prosecutor's office has denounced President Jair Bolsonaro's official party for the alleged diversion of public funds intended to promote gender equality. According to investigations, the ruling party diverted around $70,000 intended to finance the electoral campaigns of 4 women candidates to deputies in the state of Minas Gerais. Bolsonaro's former advisor declared before the public ministry that the funds were redirected to cover the costs of campaign material for Bolsonaro, Álvaro Antonio, and other candidates with the goal of boosting their campaigns in 2018. The Argentine Minister of Justice, Germán Garavano, has confirmed irregularities in the primary elections, as reported by the Together for Change coalition. They had reported a lack of impartiality by some officials at polling stations. The complaint was mentioned by President Mauricio Macri at a cabinet meeting on Monday. He later traveled to the province of Tucumán as a part of his campaign for the general elections on October 27th. Hundreds turned out for a rally held by Argentina's left-leaning candidate Alberto Fernández, the likely winner in this month's polls. Fernández beat President Mauricio Macri by a landslide in the primary elections known as PASO in August. The shock result rattled Argentina's debt and currency markets, driving the peso and bonds to record lows as investors worried about the country's shift away from neoliberalism. Argentinians will head to the polls on October 27th to decide on their country's future.
The only message I want to leave you today is forget all our difference. Let's get together to end hunger in Argentina once and for all. Let's get this proposal out as soon as possible, because this proposal is not a campaign proposal. This is a proposal from Argentina that we can begin to realize today. We really have to be ashamed. We say we are the country that produces food for 400 million people, and we cannot feed 15 million of our own people who live in poverty.
We have more stories coming up, including the son of former South Africa's President Jacob Zuma appearing before a commission of inquiry into corruption. Don't go anywhere.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Earth. Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur. A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis, and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto en ahí.
Dot in the eye. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. The son of South African former President Jacob Zuma has appeared before the Commission of Inquiry seeking to unearth corruption. Duduzane Zuma has been implicated as a fixer for the controversial Gupta family. This family is alleged to have a hand in making executive decisions while President Jacob Zuma was in office. Our correspondent Matuba Malachi was following those proceedings.
First, it was his father, former President Jacob Zuma, in the hot seat at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. It didn't go so well, with the former president's counsel threatening to pull out of proceedings. Months later, it's now the turn of his son, Duduzane Zuma.
Mr. Tony Gupta is a business partner of mine. Yes. And he's also a very dear and close friend.
Zuma Jr. had to respond to allegations that he was a crucial link between government and the controversial Gupta family. Allegations leveled against him include a former deputy minister being offered a finance minister post and thousands of dollars in kickbacks if he agreed. But the young Zuma says he feels prejudiced by some questions put to him.
This was raised in the media. There was media statements put out. The man went on TV and said whatever he needed to say. I'm not taking away from why he did it. I don't know. He did what he had to do. Good for him. I have no issues with that. Now, what I'm saying is, it's the first time I'm being asked this question.
During his appearance months ago, former President Jacob Zuma also denied that the Gupta family were involved in selecting members of his cabinet. He, however, admitted that the Guptas were indeed his friends and business associates of his son Duduzane. But the young Zuma was defensive throughout the proceedings.
There were more denials than concessions in Duduzane Zuma's testimony at the State Capture Inquiry, but we expect to see more pressure being put on him as days go by, because he will be cross-examined by lawyers of people who implicated him in serious allegations of corruption. Amatiwa Mahlachi in Johannesburg for Telesur.
Climate change activists have launched fresh protests in South Africa. The activists marched in the streets of Cape Town, waving banners and shouting slogans calling for the South African government to act on climate change. Climate activists have in the past months been mobilizing mostly in major cities across the globe, demanding governments cut carbon emissions.
Now, this is all about telling the truth and getting the government to declare a climate emergency. This is serious. We can't wait any longer. The government needs to step up and act, and it's about telling people, getting people to realize it's an emergency. We need to act now.
The Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, has highlighted the challenges to be presented in Africa in order to achieve peace in the continent. During a meeting of the United Nations Security Council, the Secretary General stressed that the organization's largest peace missions are in the African region. However, the deployment of more than 80,000 Blue Helmet troops across the continent has led to an increase in tensions continent-wide. The Secretary explained that they must focus on the cause of conflicts in Africa, which are inequality and poverty, in order to solve them. Moving to the Caribbean, with a general election due next year, Trinidad and Tobago's government has presented what many are calling a sweetheart budget. The $5.3 billion TT fiscal package was presented by Finance Minister Calm Imber on Monday. He announced an increase in the minimum wage from $15 to $17.50 per hour starting from December 2019. Persons employed in state community enhancement programs also got a 15% pay hike. Farming will become a tax-free industry, with all fees and duties on all imports for farmers to be removed. And a ban on the importation of styrofoam in the food industry and the use of plastic water bottles in government offices will take effect at the start of 2020. Additionally, government will replace all incandescent bulbs to more energy-efficient ones in every household across the island, free of charge. There will also be a 10% increase in stipends for persons in the on-the-job training program and an increased intake of 8,000 trainees. Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley shared her thoughts on how important sustainability is to small island states of the Caribbean that are most vulnerable to the harsh effects of climate change. Mottley was speaking at the Trade for Sustainable Development Forum in Geneva, Switzerland, where she recalled the saga of Hurricane Dorian and its devastating effects.
It was category hell. For those of us who flew into the Bahamas within 48 hours of the all clear, it was absolutely patent that the destruction was unimaginable. Small states cannot continue arguing for vulnerability over and over and over for 3 decades and to be ignored, and for us to believe that therefore that the world cares enough about us. The bottom line is that the opportunities for trade and economic activity are there. What is missed start with 100%. Let us claim ground where we are, and let us ensure that those countries to be able to make the changes where we can in terms of renewable energy, in terms of banning coal plants, in terms of planting trees, in terms of our work with materials, not just plastics, but other materials that have the capacity to regrettably alter the world that we've come to love.
At least 2 members of the Caribbean Community CARICOM have reintroduced visa requirements for Haitian nationals. Barbados and Dominica have both re-implemented the travel restrictions. It does not apply to Haitian nationals who are holders of diplomatic or official passports, who are business persons, or those who are holders of US, UK, Canadian or Schengen visas. Barbados, which allowed visa-free movement of Haitian nationals last year, was the first to announce a reversal of the measure. This is believed to be linked to a wave of protests in Haiti due to government corruption, inflation, and the scarcity of fuel.
Expect us to create the new industries to transit.
We're taking one last break. When we come back, 10 people have died in a bomb blast in Afghanistan. We have details after this.
We are present at every event where our nations are staring. We believe in a new global vision, united in every broadcasting. We keep expanding our horizons and working on a closer and better communication. Now, in Grenada, Telesur, the news source from South America and the Caribbean.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. A bomb blast in the east of Afghanistan killed at least 10 people, including a child, on Monday, in an attack targeting a minibus carrying new army recruits. Ataullah Khogiani, a spokesman for the governor of Nangara province, said the attack wounded 28 other people. The bomb was placed in a rickshaw and detonated when the army bus arrived. Khogiani said that some of the injured brought to a regional hospital are in critical condition.
I was standing in the area when a bomb exploded, and right after that, I saw a number of people and children got injured.
The French National Assembly debated immigration on Monday in order to impose new restrictions controlling the migration flow through ongoing targeted aid.
Le système français d'asile est aujourd'hui.
The French asylum system is saturated today, as if we were experiencing the delay effects of the crisis of 2015 to 2016. The data is clear and undeniable. In 2018, France registered a record 123,000 asylum requests, so an increase of 22% on the previous year, even when at the same time requests were going down by 10% in the rest of Europe.
Chacun doit comprendre.
Everyone needs to understand that when we support access to care for the Comorian population, we reinforce the foundation of social services. When we help a young girl from the Sahel to stay longer in school so that she escapes a forced marriage or an early pregnancy, when we offer the West African youth the possibility of a superior excellent education thanks to the French-Senegalese Dakar University campus, when we encourage female entrepreneurs in Africa, when we promote in the heart of the Sahel large-scale agriculture to benefit small farming sectors. Yes, we bring concrete solutions for the development of these countries, and apart from that, we bring concrete solutions to the migration challenges.
Canada will head to elections on October 21st to elect members of Parliament and the office of the Prime Minister. Our correspondent in Toronto, Pablo Vibanco, has more.
We're exactly 2 weeks away from voting in Canada's federal election, and tonight will be the first debate to feature all of the candidates from the leading political parties. Now, the Conservatives, led by Andrew Scheer, are polling just ahead of the Justin Trudeau Liberals, with the NDP and Jagmeet Singh, along with the Bloc Québécois and the Green Party, led by Elizabeth May, trailing far behind. Now, in Canada's first-past-the-post parliamentary system, the candidate to win the most votes in each riding gets the seat for that riding and goes to represent that district in the House of Commons. The party that wins the most seats in the 338 House of Commons gets to form government, and the leader of that party becomes Prime Minister. Now, the same polls that have the Conservatives ahead of the Liberals are thereby projecting that the Liberals have a high likelihood of winning a minority government. Tonight in the debate, it's expected that climate change and the economy will dominate the debate, although the indigenous rights issues are likely to also be mentioned significantly, given that this past weekend, something that took up much of the headlines here in Canada was a decision by the Trudeau government to challenge settlements for victims of the residential school system.
That was our correspondent Pablo Vibanco with that report. U.S. President Donald Trump has warned he would obliterate Turkey's economy if it took action in Syria that he considered off limits. Trump tweeted the warning after he was criticized for pulling 50 U.S. troops from Syria's northeast border on Sunday, with Kurdish special forces calling it a stab in the back. A day later, his warning to Turkey appears to be aimed at placating critics who accused him of abandoning the Syrian Kurds. The decision drew criticism from Democrats and a rebuke from some of Trump's fellow Republicans in Congress. A second whistleblower in the United States has come forward in regard to calls made by the President Donald Trump to his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky. The original report of a potentially unconstitutional telephone conversation between the presidents of the United States and Ukraine has been confirmed by the appearance of a second whistleblower serving as an intelligence agent and who has already interviewed or was interviewed by Inspector Michael Atkinson. The new information could leave Trump without a case, as he insisted that the investigation is based on inaccurate statements. The heads of 3 House committees requested the White House provide verifiable documentation on the executive's relationship with Ukraine. On Thursday and Friday of this week, negotiators from the world's 2 biggest economies will sit down in Washington to try to find a solution to the long-running China-US trade war, which threatens the entire world economy.
No doubt the world will be watching when China and the United States sit down for a 13th round of trade talks in Washington at the end of this week. The context is even more complicated than expected as impeachment proceedings against Donald Trump move forward.
China's position on the trade talks remains firm. We hope that both sides will be able to meet halfway and reach a mutually beneficial agreement that has win-win results for all.
The talks will begin with hopes of an understanding to postpone the increase in tariffs, but it is not clear how the negotiations will be affected by the recent volatility on the markets and the impeachment against Donald Trump.
President Trump's actions throughout this trade war have increased tension and done a lot of damage to relations between the two countries. So Chinese people no longer see the United States as a negotiation partner that can be trusted.
Although Trump denies it, U.S. companies and consumers are already feeling the impact of increased tariffs on China. Beijing is seeking opportunities in other markets to offset the losses imposed by Washington. In recent months, the government has signed more than 30 bilateral agreements.
I think China and the United States should sit down to talk, but the U.S. cannot expect China to back off. China has more power today and they have to respect that. The trade war isn't good for anyone. It affects our economy and that of other countries as prices go up.
The effects of this trade war reach far beyond the borders of China and the United States. That's why countries all over the world will be watching what happens in Washington and hoping the two countries reach an agreement to overcome their differences.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.